Hey everyone, I'm Carlos and welcome to a new book discussion of productbooklab.com. Every month we discuss online a book about product management together with the author and other product colleagues. If you want to find the recordings from our previous discussions and also join us and participate on the upcoming ones, go to productbooklab.com. To find out how to support the book club and help us keep it running without any ads, check the links in the description. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining, for the ones joining for the first time, for the ones joining again. My name is Carlos. This is the productbooklab.com, and yeah, every month we discuss a book related to product management. And today we're going to discuss Every Product Manager's First 90 Days by John Franck. And yeah, we have John with us on the call, so super excited to discuss the book. I know a lot of people are starting jobs this month, last month, so I think super relevant for a lot of us. And yeah, welcome and thanks, John.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Nice. Maybe we can start, by yourself giving a quick intro, a bit of about the book as well, maybe.
Sure. Yep. So I'm a senior product manager in Colorado. I was just telling Carlos right before we started here. It's very cold here today. It's snowing, but it's a great place to live. So I'm a senior product manager. I just transitioned in the last month from one company to a new one. So I'm also in my own first 90 days at a new job. And I went from a large 5,000 person company to a startup. So we're an 8-person startup, changing how people are investing in and investing together. So it's an exciting time. And obviously, I wrote the book, Every Product Manager's First 90 Days, about a year and a half ago. Published that in October of 2020. It's been really exciting to see it get accepted by the product community and help people on their journey to starting new jobs and being successful in product management.
Awesome. Yeah. How has been the feedback so far you have got from the book?
It's been a lot more than I expected. And I guess that gets a little bit into writing the book itself. When I wrote it, I had no real plans for or expectations for how it would be received or how well it would do. And it took off a lot more than I expected. I wrote the book, honestly, I wrote it first for myself of what I would hope to read, whenever I started a new job or when I was hiring more product managers, what I'd hope to give them to train. And yeah, it's just been accepted by the product community as something that is helping a lot of people in their first 90 days.
Nice. Cool. Maybe I will send the link also of the discussion that people can post the questions, maybe, so we can also read from there. But I will make the first one that I think also now you mentioned, John. Someone asked, how do you differentiate the approach between being the first product manager and maybe the 10th one on a company, right? That you also mentioned you went from a big company now from a startup. Do you see much difference into maybe what the focus should be of those first 90 days?
Sure. Yeah, I saw that question. I think it's a great question. And to me, the difference is when you're coming in and you're the first product manager, one of your first responsibilities needs to be figuring out what the rest of the organization thinks about product, what they're thinking this role actually does. So if you're the first product person, there can be a lot of misconceptions around what product managers do or what they're supposed to be doing. And so one, I'd be, if hopefully if you have previous product experience, you're bringing that, or if this is your first product role, I'd be studying up on, this is what a product manager needs to be doing day in and day out, and be really firm on that. And then in those first 90 days, it's your job to help educate the rest of the company on what good product management looks like and good systems. So that's where I'd be putting a lot of focus if you're one of the first product managers. And then, yeah, if you're one of, you're joining a company and there are other product managers already working there, that's a great time to learn from the other product managers, see how they have been doing things historically at the company. what's been working well for them, where they've had problems, and really take that time to learn from them. And then towards the end of those 90 days is when you can start giving input on maybe areas that the product process can be improved in, and ways that you bring your unique skills and experience to help the rest of your product team at that point.
Yeah, indeed. I think super important, like you mentioned, right? If you're the first one, to make sure that how everyone wants to understand the role or the craft. Nice. Maybe I open the floor. Does someone has any questions, comments that they would like to make? From here, from the call? Yeah, Tom?
Sorry, I asked the question, so
Oh.
go from there. But yeah, I have that exact scenario where I'll be going in. I guess the question that I would have to follow up on that is how important, if you're the first product manager, would you say, how would you weight the kind of systems of product management, getting the tools in place, helping people understand that, discovery is its own process, all that kind of stuff, versus say the product strategy and getting up into those higher level strategy things?
Yeah, good question. I'm always cautious with getting systems in place too early, right? Like, you don't want to come in and add all these systems without understanding the real problems within the organization first. So I don't think you should just translate all your previous systems and what you've done at another company, if you've been in a product role, and just implement those in the first 30 days right away, because every organization operates a little bit different. So take time to see which ones to apply, and work those in as a gradual process. And otherwise, and it can just be overwhelming for the team too, if suddenly there's 5 new processes that everyone needs to follow and you're trying to communicate. So I go slow with those. And then the other half of your question around strategy, spending time working through the strategy, that's a great time to be meeting with the stakeholders and figuring out what their current strategy is in place. In the book, there's a chapter one about getting to know your stakeholders and their goals, but also knowing the future. That's a whole chapter, which is, where's the big vision for where this product is going? Where do we see this in a year from now? Where do we see this in several years from now? Understanding that, and then that can play into your overall product strategy that you're working on.
Yeah, I think another important role that I think you also mentioned, right, is sort of like the state of the company, right? Because even if it's a startup or a big one, maybe the stage of the product in itself can influence a lot on what you should be focusing.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. Karan, did you have a question?
Yep. Hey, John. Hi.
Hey.
I am midway through your book as of now, and I've just joined a new company. So yep, that was something that I wanted to explore. That was suggested to me. That shows that organically the word of mouth for your book is doing well. There's organic marketing at play. So coming back to my question, as you said, or rather within the book itself, it's given that there are particular steps that you do need to take, and there needs to be a gradual input that as a product manager that I should be giving in, else it'll be overwhelming for the team. But at the same time, if I do have a sense that a particular process that is being executed in the company is rather inefficient, and for example, in my previous experiences, there are other processes that might slightly have been superior to the current way in which things are being functioning. So how do I possibly, have an input? Because from a proof of working concept, I have historical background that A concept is superior to B concept. I've seen and lived that part.
Right.
So how do I get consensus amongst the team, or rather within senior stakeholders? As in my case, it is an MNC. So how do I get their consensus that, we need to move in a different space?
Yeah. Yep. So what I'd first start with is I'd first start by asking a lot of questions of the team around that process that's being used. Try to learn why they started using it, what they were trying to solve with it, what they were trying to improve. So start with questions, and then just start, bringing up some observations of some of the inefficiencies that you're seeing with it. At that point, I think a lot of times, if there's pain points felt by the whole team by inefficient processes, other people are going to start acknowledging that. And that's where you can start to suggest, you know what, in my previous role, we used this instead, and here were the benefits that we were seeing by using this process. But when you start by, asking questions around it, exploring it, rather than just coming in and stepping on everyone's toes, and saying, no, this is the way we're going to do it now, it lets people feel like they're part of that process as well of moving to, and you want team consensus to buy into what you're suggesting. And so you need to start pointing out maybe where that system is failing in your current organization.
Yeah. And I would just want to add another subpart to the same question. So you do not know if something is really good if you have never used that, right? You have never used a car, you'll never know how fast that can go. You always use the bicycle and like, hey, this is good enough. But you do not know the difference until you really have something that goes faster, right? So the team has been using a certain form of process. There is a comfort zone in which the team functions on a certain time scale to execute a particular task.
Yep.
But there can be better processes. Rather, there are better processes in this case. So
Yep.
how do I, have that, get them on board that, these are the things, or rather, these are the factors? Because at this point in time, my stakeholders who are present, they do not feel that the current process that they are a part of, that process is inefficient. For them, that is already an efficient process. So how do I get them on board for this?
Yeah, in that case, I would look for a way that you could experiment with it. So maybe there's a feature that you're going to launch that you try it out on. Maybe try to get buy-in just to test it out on a small scale. Maybe there's a sub team that you could implement it on for a month. Really, at this point, you're just trying to get enough buy-in to test it so that you can prove that it's more efficient, rather than overhauling the whole team and making a hard switch. That's really hard to get buy-in right away, especially if they don't see those inefficiencies. So look for ways that you can test it out and prove that it's going to be a lot better.
All right. Yep. Thanks so much, John.
Yeah, I think also what I've seen sometimes that help is indeed try to show some more evidence, right? Like using the analogy you mentioned, maybe you cannot get the people on the car to try it, but maybe if you show them a video of a car against the bike, then it will not be anymore, oh, Karan thinks it's fast, right? But this is the evidence. So I think with processes, or like now there's a lot of evidence blog posts that maybe you can also use or share, right?
Thanks, Carlos. Thanks. Really helpful.
Someone else would like to make a question or comment, or maybe also share some tips from their first 90 days as well?
Carlos, maybe I can say, Yulia.
Yeah.
Hi, John. Thanks for joining us today. So I'm not the product manager, but I'm working in internal comms in one of the multinationals in the Netherlands. So I found this book very useful, regardless of the fact that I'm not in product management. So I think it's a great book to read for anybody who is working in a big or small company and who is thinking to move between the roles. So thanks for that. I was wondering, now taking into consideration political situation between the countries, the kind of the turbulency between Russia and the rest of the world, how people who are working in product management, if I assume the majority here are here, would you give them any kind of advice, maybe how to function in this kind of environment at the moment? Maybe would you add anything in your book if you would have known that this situation might have happened?
Yeah, I think, broadly speaking, is one, just like lead with empathy. Have empathy for your team members. It's obviously everyone's going through stuff. Everyone's been going through a lot of things over the last few years, right? The pandemic, depending where you're located, the war that's breaking out. So there's a lot going on. And I think as a product manager, one thing I encourage product managers to do is that whether you're leading meetings or you can set the energy and take care of your team in a lot of different ways. One of the chapters I talk about, like, you solve problems for your team, you can get rid of drama just by doing your role really well. But I think another part of that is, yeah, having empathy for your team. So sometimes that might mean when you're starting a meeting that you're specifically spending the first 5-10 minutes not talking about work, right? Like maybe you're asking questions that about people's weekend or their week, that may give them time just to think about something else, or maybe they really need to just process something in that time. And this is really hard to do when we're all remote, right? Like when we just hop on a meeting and immediately go into what we're trying to accomplish. So I think as a product manager, you can create that space where people have time to talk about other things besides work with their coworkers. I don't know if that's exactly getting at what you're looking for, but that's at least one suggestion that would maybe help.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. And yeah, I think very important. I think I usually see as well that even though we are not like managers of people in the team, we do can influence or help at least, right, with the mood or how everyone feels. So yeah, very nice advice. Someone else would have wants to make a question or comment? Karen?
Yep. To her point, at least this is something that I realized within my new company. With the ongoing geopolitical situation that all of us are facing and are having a look at, that's gripping the world right now, I've seen that it's very easy to take a stance since politics is at play, and there seems to be a clear majority as to what is right and what is wrong. I think as a product manager, even though you might have a very strong opinion as to what is right and what is wrong, that cannot be seeped in to your team, because you are responsible for people on both sides of borders. So at present, we do have teammates who are from Russia, or possibly who are from Ukraine, who are part of our larger team. And I've seen that the senior management has handled that brilliantly, where there aren't sweeping statements being made within the company, because it's very easy, while, as you said, while you do the casual chatter or the discussion, it's very easy to discuss the ongoing scene that's there. So there was an explicit thing told that let us keep geopolitical discussions aside or our personal opinions aside, because at the end of the day, it's governments versus governments. Your teammate who's sitting there, he's not deciding on anything at all. So he or she has nothing to do with that particular scenario. So even they are in a limbo. So it's very important to have that layer of neutrality, even though you might have a very strong opinion on that particular thing. And there might be other stakeholders or other profiles who can speak about that, but you are the one who's kind of, who's in the epicenter of various roles. So it is good to keep your opinions to yourself when there are people that are involved on both sides of the action. So to have a neutral ground, even though you have a very strong opinion on a personal level, would be very important. So yeah, that is the learning that I take from my senior management.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Maybe related, I had also I think a very good point from the book that I wanted to share, and maybe John, you can also expand more, because I think indeed on one of the chapters where you talk about the stakeholders, right, and of course getting to know them. What I really like is that I think you suggest also understanding their goals, right, and well, their goals, their motivations, maybe, or like you said, right, what do they also want to achieve? Which sometimes then or can consider also on your future interactions, right? Maybe you can expand a bit more on that topic with stakeholders, and maybe how to best get to know them in those first days.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, definitely The key part there is getting to know their goals, and then the other half is knowing how they view product success. So we all have stakeholders that we need to manage. I also think we have non-stakeholders who think they should be stakeholders, and they like to make their opinion known about where things need to go, and you need to be able to manage that really well, of graciously letting them know sometimes that we're not going to execute on this, but I value your opinion and your input into the product, but you gotta be able to manage those relationships. But yeah, going back to how they view product success, I think that is really critical to start figuring out in your first 90 days. We might make assumptions what their goals are, or we might assume, oh yeah, we're all chasing the same goals, but that's not always the case, right? Especially if you have a lot of different departments. You have a sales department, they have goals and metrics that they're trying to achieve that sometimes can rub with other departments or your marketing department. And so listing all those out, knowing which stakeholders matter for each feature or what you're working on really helps bring clarity to navigating that.
Yeah, and I think what you mentioned as well, right? Maybe even sometimes getting to the metrics level, right? Because I've seen sometimes, or I've also had conversations, you join us, what is the goal? To make the product successful. And it's like, okay, what does that mean, right? Like when it's successful, what happens? And at some point you will have to confront that, oh, I thought it was something else, right? Or like, oh, I was measuring in this other way.
Right. Yeah.
Nice.
Hey guys, hey Carlos.
Hey Luis.
Yeah, my name is Lou. I started last year with a new role, actually as a colleague of Carlos, and I also tried something new too, because I think in product it's really important to have a good network within the company. And I just asked at the beginning, and I think like as everyone does at a new job, you get a short list of names, like or a long list of people to speak with, to which are important for your role. But what I did in all those conversations, I always asked like, okay, but thanks for your time. And is there someone in your team that is useful to speak with, to get to know? And I did that basically with all the people I had on my list for the initial meetings. And I think like for the first 4 or 5 months, I had like once or twice or 3 times a week still some one-on-ones, because I was asking the same thing to people there in the team. And I think it's super useful now, 1 year later, still having that kind of network from the time, and people actually liked it to get to know you a little bit. And I think it helps flowing the right feedback to you, but also if you need something from them after you have met in a kind of a more neutral way, where you do not necessarily need something from someone as the first introduction, I still benefit from it a lot. So I think is also, if you're in product and new, that it's a great way of building up a network in a new company. Just ask the person you meet, like, is there someone in your team or your manager or that you are managing that is useful for me to know?
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And especially if you're working remote or hybrid remote, right? Like you no longer have the ability just to run into people in the office. And so you're only ever meeting the people that are in the exact meetings that you're in. So asking people, who else can you introduce me to? Who else should I know? Yeah, that's a fantastic way to get to know the rest of the company. And I will say this, if you're a newer product manager and you're working in a larger company, a great thing to do is to reach out to other product managers not on your team. If there's other divisions that have product managers, set up meetings with them and just learn from them. Everyone approaches product management a little bit differently. They're going to have how they approach it, and it's a great opportunity. And every time I've seen people do it, everyone's open and receptive to it. To be able to spend 30 minutes, grab lunch with them or virtual lunch, whatever it might be, and just pick their brain on product management.
And especially, I think at the beginning, right, is sort of like the perfect opportunity to go and have these conversations, or to spend a bit more time getting to know people.
Yeah.
Nice. Someone else would like to share maybe some tips or make question, comment? Lisa?
Yeah, hello everyone. So I have a question about actually the exercise at chapter 7, Know Your Customer. Basically what we were supposed to do is to fill out the customer profiles, and then there were additional steps that I'm not going to spoil it. But yeah, basically I was wondering how to approach it, because I started to fill it out from the knowledge that I had, basically like what I was thinking our profiles were. But then later I kind of figured out that I probably should have based this on the actual data and the actual profiles that we have. So can you clarify a bit on that? Like, what was the direction that I should have gone?
Yeah, I think what you just said is gold. It's what everyone struggles with, right? We have in our mind who our customer is or what demographics they are, and sometimes, and probably most of the time, that might not be accurate with what the data is telling us they are. So I think it's a great place to. I would almost split it. I would do who you think your customer is, and this can be great to do in your first few weeks. Who your base assumptions are. Here's who I think this product's actually serving. List those out, and then go dig into the data and see if it confirms those assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next step is actually go, talk to real customers and kind of compare those three different ones. And that's how I would approach it. But going back to that first one, why I wouldn't say just skip over who you assume the customer is as you're onboarding and learning the product, if there's a big mismatch there, who you're like, oh, I think this is who our customer is, but then the data tells you something very differently, that's a mismatch that you need to start working through. That could be a marketing issue. That could be part of how the product's designed. So yeah, if you've had a big difference there as you've started to work through that, that's good action items to start working on as a product manager.
Sounds good. Can I have a follow-up question on that? So you mentioned starting to have conversations with those clients, and this is what I struggle with a little bit. So what are the things that you want to ask your clients as a first point of contact, and setting up like general interviews? Because it is a bit difficult, because you kind of want to give the direction, but you also don't want to limit things, and you also don't want to have like an hour of their time. You want to have like 20 minutes, get like the, I don't know, crucial things. And yeah, sometimes it's difficult to find the balance between finding the right information in the interviews, so like digging deeper into problems and to, I don't know, the opportunities that there are, and also like, not limiting the conversation to just problems or opportunities. So maybe you have some tips about that.
Yeah, so I think the first thing I'd say is definitely read the Mom Test. I know Rob Fitzpatrick was on here a few months ago. That's one of my favorite books. So definitely read that. So that's the first thing I'd say to that. The second thing is just get going with those first interviews, asking questions that you have early on. How did you discover the product? What was some of the first things you did within the product? Where have you had problems trying to do this or to do that? I would start really broad there in those first customer interviews. And then as you get more comfortable, as you understand exactly what you're trying to solve in your role as a product manager, that's when those conversations can then become more specific as you're trying to solve exact problems, where you can ask a series of questions to get you to the answer that you're trying to get. But yeah, don't be afraid to jump into those and just ask broad questions. It can just be a conversation at first. The most important thing is that you're just starting to have customer conversations. And just asking broad, open questions that get them talking about it will be good. And then, I lean on Rob for how to phrase and ask really good questions.
Yeah, and I think as you mentioned, I think it's quite important also to sort of like maybe start broad, because I know sometimes you might be the PM for like a specific feature, right? That it's just one small part of a whole product of how the user interacts with, right? So I also usually recommend, like, if you can first understand the whole product or what the user really wants to solve, regardless of the small part where you work on, that would also then help you understand how your team contributes, right, to that bigger goal. But yeah, indeed, the mom test I see on the chat links are there is very good, and indeed we discussed with Rob a couple of months ago. I'm going to read one question from Aofi, that she says that the baby's crying, so I'm going to make the question.
One more thing that I would like to add here,
Yes.
like we were discussing in the previously that have 5-10 minutes before the call to discuss about how these are. So what I like to do is to ask the customer about what they do, so that we are very clear on what the customer profile is. So that helps them with two things: understanding how they're going to use the product first, and second, they feel more comfortable. Even if you extend the time a bit, they feel more comfortable and connected to share more details with you and go into detail and help you with whatever the queries are.
Definitely. Nice. Awesome. So
yeah, that's a good tip, because like we work with marketing agencies and we have a product for marketing, and sometimes like they're one of our target audience, but sometimes the agencies, they use like 5 different products for different things. So that's indeed a useful tip to us, like in which exactly way they use our product and why don't they use it for like other components and use their competitors. So yeah, that's a good one. Thanks.
Nice. All right. The question says, you refer to Squirrel products in the book, right? For Squirrel product features, you are now the delivery owner of how do you deal with flagging your concerns that this shiny new feature may not be a hot customer demand. So I think maybe, yeah, the situation is you land into this team and this team might have already this big plan that this is it, right? This is what we really need to do. And as we said, maybe after a few interviews, you might find out that, well, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. How do you handle that, right? And you're new, right? So probably you don't know people and you might feel a bit like, I don't know if I should highlight this.
Yeah. Definitely a tricky balance to figure out in your first month. You don't want to come across that you know everything and that you want to, your opinion matters more than all the work, because the first thing you got to think of is these are people that have been there, sometimes years, sometimes 10 years, right? And they've been working at this company and you're brand new. And so you do need to value their experience and their input. But sometimes, especially if an organization doesn't have a good product process, they don't have a good way of validating ideas, there could be, obvious misses that are about to happen with the product. So data is your best friend in all of this. You can, I think, kind of humbly find data, do research, whether it's analytical data, whether it's customer research data, start to assemble that. And then as you raise your concerns, I'd be raising them and say, I have a few concerns about this that we're building. In my interviews this week, I didn't hear anyone really asking about us building that or looking at the data. I don't think this is exactly where to go. And you can start presenting that. I would just keep presenting it. And that might be all you can do in your first month or two at that point. As people start trusting you, as you start to have that authority in your role, you can make a firmer stance, in my opinion, on saying, we're not going to build this, and here's why. And that's when you have that whole case of why you're not going to execute on that. But if it's your first month and this is work that's happened over the last 6 months, for you to come in at that point and say, no, like we can't do this, the best you can do is try to make your case with data and leave it at that.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, and indeed, right? I think that the important bit is see how you can bring everyone along, so it doesn't really come across, as you said, that it's just your opinion that we shouldn't do this. Yep. Maybe related with data and insights, because I see also that can be something quite overwhelming, right? I remember also when I joined where I work now, that, as you also mentioned on the book, right, sometimes onboardings are not that well prepared. So it might be like you join, here is these dashboards, or here is, even you can query, and then you sort of like get paralyzed with, okay, what should I really be looking at, right? And how should I read this? How do you go about indeed data, right? Like how do you structure what to look at?
Yeah. Big question. Start small. Start with what the one thing you're trying to find an answer to. So with what feature you're working on, what do I need to know here? Do I need to know where we're having a drop off? Do I need to know how long people are using the screen, how many screens they're going to? I mean, it really varies depending what type of product you're working on. But I would start with one small problem that you have, and work it out. Especially if it's a new data platform that you're not familiar with. Sometimes it might involve a team member to help pull that data. But start small with some quick problem, and then go from there. The thing with data is that you can find answers to everything if you set it up right, but it is a big process. So yeah. Try not to aim too big too early.
Yeah, nice. Someone else would like to make a question or maybe comments? Himanshu? Yeah.
Not exactly related to the first 90 days, but as we were discussing about the networking inside the organization, so the startup that I work is very small team. The product team is very small, so I want to build this network outside. Is it possible to reach out to other people and ask them that I'm facing problems around these things? Would you be able to help? If yes, what should be the right way to do it?
Sure. Yeah. So, yeah, depending where you are, I find the product community is one of the best communities, both globally, obviously, like we have right now, but also locally. I have quite a few. In here in Colorado, there's specific like product Slack groups, there's product meetups, there's all sorts of things. Like once you start looking for it, you can find it. So depending on what you're looking for, if you're looking for in person to be able to meet with people and talk through it, or virtually, even Lunch Club. Lunch Club is a really cool software where you just get paired randomly with people for a 30-minute conversation. And I think as they've been developing over the last year, you can narrow down, and I think try to target specific job functions. So you could try to get targeted with other product managers. But yeah, I would start there. I think it can be really hard just to start like cold reaching out on LinkedIn for people because everyone's at this point views it through a lens of what's this person trying to sell me or convince me to do, when all you're really wanting to do is just swap ideas with people. And then, my last suggestion would be like, right here is a great group, right? This is 100, 200 people that all have similar interests. You could reach out to anyone probably within this group. No one send me messages if you don't want to be reached out to, but this is a community of people that want to share ideas and discuss things. So I think this is a natural starting point to send some messages and say, hey, I saw you were in Product Book Club. I wonder if you want to grab 30 minutes and discuss product and work through some of the things I'm facing in my company. Carlos didn't kick me off of the call, so I guess I'm allowed to say that.
Yeah, no, we have seen happening, and so please feel free indeed to message people you have seen here.
Awesome. I'll definitely reach out to some groups here locally as well and try to. Thank you.
Nice. Yeah. Maybe to also follow up on that one, because indeed I think we discussed at the beginning, right, the difference maybe if you are the first PM or if you're joining a big group, but what recommendations would you also have if I've seen also happening that you might be the first PM joining a startup, a company, but maybe also you still feel, right, that you're not that senior, let's say. So Indeed, and then it can be very easy or overwhelming sometimes on, okay, what should I do now, or how should I position the role or the craft in itself, right? How do you go, maybe if you are on that situation, right? Or what recommendations would you have, John?
Yeah, I guess one thing I'd say is there's a lot of really good product books in the space, and that's why you have this lunch club. Is there's a lot of great product books around how to be structured as a product team, and so you can lean on that knowledge. Empowered product teams, some of those other books. So spend time reading, and if you're learning yourself, rely on the knowledge expert that other people have written and have had really good success within product. So that's probably where I'd start with that. And then, but besides that, I like the idea of trying to find a mentor or someone in the space who has gone that route before you, who, ideally has gone through that exact same experience, but even if they haven't gone through that exact same one, is in a similar place just a few years down the road that you can talk to and learn from.
Nice.
Yeah, so I've been facing exactly same issues right now. So from being a product manager to a product leader, that's I'm switching to. So one more thing that I figured out is there are courses available for being a product leader as well, or a product exec. So that's one more thing apart from these two things that I'm trying to figure out to find some good courses around this who can help me shape my mentality in that direction.
Yeah, nice. Guillermo, you have yes?
Yeah, I have a question. In your book, it's really a lot of go talk to people, go know your product, go know your customers, right? But do you have kind of like a roadmap or a balance to say, okay, start here, then go a little bit more here, or I don't know, try to at least, what would be your advice, like in this first 90 days? Because it cannot be so blocked. Like I just talked to my peers right now, in this first month.
Yep. Yeah. So you're
how
asking,
would you structure, this first 90 days?
Yep. Yeah. Good question. So kind of, if we take all the kind of different chapters in the book, how do you organize all of that into kind of a system to go through all that? Is that what you're asking? Cool. The book, I've been asked this a fair amount, is like, is the book has to be done linear? Does it not have to be done linear? And no, like, use the book however you want to, in whatever order that makes sense. The first few chapters, you can kind of broadly break it down into like big chunks of people, processes, and product as it goes through it. But the people part, I definitely recommend all of those conversations should happen in the first month. So knowing your team and stakeholders, you want to have those ones, because it gets really awkward if you've been in a meeting 7 times with someone and that's the only context you know them in, to then 2 months later say, oh, hey, can we have a quick one-on-one where I get to know you? And you already have, you've seen each other over and over and over again. So I try to push those ones as early as possible in the first week or two, if you can. And then those other discovery ones, this is where it can get lost, because after your first few weeks is when you really start to get busy with other stuff, and spending time digging into numbers or digging into your marketing. Those can just get lost, or you can get busy doing other things. So I would just block out different time blocks in your calendar. I'd start by going through the book and skimming it as an overview, looking through the different exercises, seeing which ones really resonate. Even when I wrote this, I fully understand that there's probably some chapters or exercises in here that aren't applicable to every position that people are working in. So skim through it, see which ones you think you are really going to be important for you to do, and then just schedule those out in time blocks there. So I don't know if that fully answers like an exact timeline to do everything, but I definitely weight the people part on the front end, and then make sure you're scheduling out the other pieces.
Cool. No, thanks a lot. That's already very useful. Yeah.
Cool.
And thanks for providing the PDFs or the templates, because I don't have the courage to write on the book, but it's good. I found it out.
Nice. Maybe what I've also seen, maybe is useful as well, is to discuss it. What I did when I got the book as well is to talk with, to show it to my manager. You know, like, hey, look, these are all things I believe I should invest time. Right? How do you also see it? Right? Because, for example, yeah, some companies might think that you are super connected with sales is more important than another one, right? So I think maybe that's also a nice exercise. Now that you have the book, how does your manager see the priorities, maybe?
Yep. Yeah, and one thing I tell people, this is what's funny when you start a new job, is when you go into a new job, you expect that your manager is going to have a plan for you, and what they want you to do. And your manager at the same time is thinking, oh, this is a smart person I just hired. They're going to figure out what to do in the first 90 days. And so both parties are kind of expecting the other person to have a plan and a system in place. And that's why I targeted the book more towards, you know, the person starting the job rather than the manager, because the managers, they're busy, right? Like, you're hiring either because someone left and you're trying to backfill that role, or because you got so busy that it's just a matter of expansion and you're adding members to your team. And so it's really hard for managers to have the time to think through everything that their new hire needs to do in those first 90 days. So yeah, I love that idea of almost kind of going through the book with your manager and getting their input on which sections they think will be important. That will help them a lot as well.
May I do another question?
Yeah.
Do you have any indications when these 91st days are not going as planned or not good, or like some pitfalls?
You don't pass the probation period.
that's lagging, right? Let's see what's leading to this, or with it kind of like, I don't know, yeah, indications with. Here in Germany, it's like 6 months. Then I don't have 90 days, so I have like
Right.
6 months.
Yeah, if you're having a really hard time following through on any of the exercises, you know, you're reaching out to people and they're not responding, or you're trying to set up meetings, or it just feels like friction at every step, that would mean to me that there's some organizational issues going on, that it's not going well. I don't know if that's like the angle you're looking for with that question, or like internally, like with yourself, that things aren't going well within the job. Yeah,
It's kind of like the flip side, I would say, right? So the 90 days more like what you have to do, right? So my question is more on the, yeah, how do you see, but friction totally makes sense to me. Yeah. Thanks.
I think another tip now I remember is also to reach out maybe to someone else that has also started recently, right? And ask them for, like, I've seen sometimes, for example, yeah, people sharing like, oh, I made this list of like all the metrics that I found out that are important, for example, or all these links that helped me a lot. Similar with Lou, I remember I met him couple of months and he told me like, hey, I did this exercise, and I was like, oh yeah, of course I should also do that. Now that I'm joining, so I think that's also maybe a nice tip.
Yeah, the one thing I want to be careful and say here is that I think feeling overwhelmed, you know, feeling imposter syndrome, those things, those aren't signs to me that your first 90 days are going poorly. I think everyone feels that at some point in your first 90 days. Be prepared. Like, you will feel overwhelmed, maybe like you don't know exactly what you're doing. Imposter syndrome will be in there. That's not an indication to me at a level that you're in the wrong role or it's the wrong company. Everyone I talk to feels that at some point. And I don't think just following the book is going to solve that for you. Hopefully it helps some, but yeah, if you start to feel that, I don't think it should be alarm bells going off. If you hit the end of your 90 days and you've gone through all the exercises and you still have no idea what you're supposed to be doing, that maybe is an alarm bell to me of an organization with management that there is a potential problem there.
Nice. Someone else would like to make another question or comment?
I'm just curious, if the company is scaling up and everything is so crazy quick, is 90 days is still relevant, or you need to try and squeeze it in 30 days?
Yep. Yeah. Good question. The 90 days, it's not an exact formula. I don't, when I wrote, I didn't expect anyone to, on day 89 be getting to the conclusion chapter, right? It is a little relative to how fast you're moving. I will say this, I think this story is partially in that book. I hired a product manager as I was putting together a lot of the resources that ended up making this book. And I gave him all these tasks to do, a lot of the exercises, different departments to meet with, different people, different data to dig into. And he blazed through all of that in around like a week and a half, 2 weeks. He got through it all. And he ended up not being very successful at that company because he went too fast through it, right? Like he checked all the boxes of areas that he needed to learn, but it wasn't actually him understanding and taking that in, right? Like it takes time to fully learn on a deep level, a level that you can actually execute on with some of this stuff. So I do caution against going way too fast just so you check the boxes to say, oh yeah, I know what we're doing from a marketing perspective, or I know what our sales are doing, because that's not going to set a good foundation for you to go off of in the future. So, but yeah, if you get through it in 30 days and you've had time to dig in and learn each of these areas, that's totally fine. And that makes sense to me.
And even after, now I also saw it. I mean, I've been more than 90 days, but also sort of like checking like, okay, have I spent that much time on this aspect, on this other one, right? I think all of these points you mentioned on the book are helpful on a continuous basis as well, right?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. All right. Someone else, any questions, comments? Or would like to share any other tips maybe from the first 90 days?
Yeah, maybe a tip from my side. I'm not quite sure if that was covered in the book, but talking to your manager a lot, like in general, forming this you and your manager relationship. John, correct me if I'm wrong. Like, was it covered in the book or not? Because
yeah, there's an exercise in there where you really want to flesh out what their top 3 goals are for you. over the next 90 days. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. I would also maybe like take some questions from the stakeholder thing, where like how do they define the product success, and what are their expectations towards you in terms of managing stakeholders, being like internally in the team, their relationship. Maybe they expect like some help with certain things that you're not aware of. So yeah, just really forming a good relationship with your manager.
Right. Yeah. And let's, going back to the very first question we talked about, which is, or one of the second questions around if you're one of the first product managers and how you needed to coach the rest of the company, there could be part of that with stakeholders where they have expectations of you and what they're hoping you're going to do. And that might not fully be what should be done from a product perspective. And so that is time to slowly coach them and help them understand how to work well with product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just maybe one more question to this. Let's imagine that, like you said, you're new to the organization. There are no product managers. And then the stakeholders have crazy expectations towards you that, I don't know, you will do some weird things that you did not think you're going to be doing. So what is the best way to then kind of step back and clarify these expectations and say like, hey, I'm actually not going to be doing that. So yeah, maybe you have some tips on that.
Yeah, just, read up, study up on what a successful product organization looks like. Again, I reference other books. Look at how successful companies organize product and what those relationships look like. So make sure first that you understand that and understand how that works well. And then, in those conversations, slowly bring that up. And don't be afraid to set those boundaries, right? When they're asking you, I had to coach a product manager through this. She came and she has a fantastic personality and super nice, right? And people would ask her to do stuff that wasn't her job, and she would have time capacity, because you have a lot of times in those first 90 days you have extra time capacity. There can be weird gaps, and so people would ask her to do stuff, and she'd say yes, and she was able to do those things and do her job. But I was coaching her, I was saying, you know what, like, eventually you won't be able to do this, right? You need to be able to say no to things, and you can say no graciously to people and say, this really isn't my role to be doing this. I think this is more this person's role, or it would be great if we hired someone to do this, because this isn't a product position doing this.
And also as well, maybe try to find it. I've seen during the interviews themselves, right? You can already sometimes spot some red flags on, like, wait, what am I going to be doing?
Yeah. With that, in that one of those first chapters, it's about looking at a job description and breaking down that job description. And I will say this: a lot of companies, when they need to hire a product manager, they go and they Google, what is a product manager job description? They find a generic job description. They take that, they maybe modify a few lines, and they post that. I'm not saying that's all companies, but a lot of companies do that. And so it may look exactly like what a product manager should be doing from a job description standpoint, but in their mind, that's not what they're expecting you to do. And so, yeah, you can spend time in the interview trying to dig into exactly what day in and day out will look like. But also, once you start a job, you want to be able to figure that out too.
Yeah, nice. All right. Just checking at the time as well. Maybe now we can take like a picture for the ones that have the book, or if you just want also to appear. Yeah. All right. Let me count 3, 2, 1. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks, John, for joining. I think a lot of great tips, recommendations for everyone, for not only the first 90 days, I would say, but for the career. So yeah, thanks again for joining.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. This has been really fun. I enjoyed it. Definitely don't be afraid to reach out on LinkedIn. And if you want to help me out a little bit, Amazon reviews are fantastic for the book. They helps me out a lot. So shameless plug there. But yeah, definitely, I've enjoyed this. But yeah, don't be afraid to reach out. Message me on LinkedIn, and we can continue the conversation.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, everyone. Hey, everyone. I'm Carlos, and welcome to a new book discussion of productbooklab.com. Every month, we discuss online a book about product management together with the author and other product colleagues. If you want to find the recordings from our previous discussions and also join us and participate on the upcoming ones, go to productbooklab.com. To find out how to support the book club and help us keep it running without any ads, check the links in the description.